Hi, good morning or good day. Today I'm going to talk to you about color theory. A little bit of a background on me to tell you a little bit um, about what I learned and so on. So basically, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a comic book artist. It's a long story anyway. And so my parents wanted me to have a real job before going into that area, that field, because of course to get a job in that field was not really sure. So they asked me to be we had a family business, and my parents were opticians, so I was trained as an optician. As a result, I went to a high school, a technical high school. So I studied draft, industrial designs, things like this. I worked with a lot of different machines, industrial machines, and I also and so after that I graduated as an optician. So I was trained, we learned everything about optic, about light, about lenses, about all that stuff. So it gave me definitely some sort of a knowledge about light and the scientific side of light. So everything starts with light. We don't know, I mean, we know a lot, and we're still having some doubts about light because there's two vision of lights. One is a wave, so basically like a radio wave, just the length of the wave is different for light. Or it's a particle, the photo. Um, let's say it's both, a little bit of both. Anyway, the human eye is a captor, it's like a digital camera pretty much. So the light that gets inside the eye is analyzed, inside the eye is analyzed by the brain, after going through the cells and so on. So our perception of light and colors is really fascinating for that. So let's imagine it's like a spectrum, so like a wheel goes up and down. So we go from infrared to yellow. So from the infrared we go through red, orange, all the warm colors, and then on the other side of the yellow, into the ultraviolet, we go through all the blues. So the green, the blue, the cyan, then the ultramarine, then the ultraviolet. So that's pretty much the light. And so basically, imagine that an item, the color of an item is depending not on, it's depending on two things. It's depending on what it reflects of the light is getting, but also what it absorbs. So basically, something that is white is going to reflect all the light, and something that is black is going to swallow all those waves, and so it doesn't reflect anything. So something that is red basically doesn't reflect the green, and so on and so on. So that's how we define the item. Maybe you've heard about there's a really famous artist. His name is Anish Kapoor, and is British, and he just bought the formula of what's supposedly to be the darkest black ever made. So basically, it's a matter that really swallow the light, almost like a magical black velvet, would just not reflect any kind of light. On the other hand, we have the white, and there's different quality of white. Even for artist painter, we use either zinc white, lead white, titanium white, silver white. And the quality of those whites, the same thing for the black. Those whites, some white are more white than the other ones. So the strongest white we have so far on the palette as painter is the titanium white. But we'll go through that eventually with the use of colors. Basically, after what I said, it's also important to understand that the light in your studio is going to impact the colors you're using, or the rendering of the image you're looking at. Pretty simple. If you put a red light in your studio and it's only red, of course, you're going to see everything in red. So a lot of colors are going to disappear. So it's a bit extreme. But you have to know that if you work with electric light, any kind of bulb is kind of not giving you the full rendering of the spectrum. So it's why when you have a digital camera, you can in the program you can select if it's tungsten white, or neon white, or sunlight, and so on, because those lights actually are different. So if you work with in my studio I work with electric light mostly, and so I know those lights affect the colors. when I look at the wall, it looks more yellow than if it was with the sunlight. So be aware that if you work in the studio and you bring the painting you've done somewhere else in another environment with another light, it's going to affect as well the light of the painting. So you know, that's a little bit the challenge with some of the really amazing, you know, bright painting, and it's also why contemporary museum are mostly whites, because those colors, they don't affect your painting. We'll go through that as well later about what we call simultaneous contrast. So that means that the colors around the color affect that color. There's actually, I'm reading as I'm talking to you, there's actually two systems that are different when it comes to colors. There's the additive system and the subtractive system. Those two systems are basically painters use the subtractive system. Sometimes they don't even know about it, but so the additive system is based on light. So it's what was used a long time ago in the TV sets. The three primary colors of additive system are green, blue, and red. Basically, the additive system, as its name means it, you add color in order to get colors. So let's say we're in a black room, there's no light at all. If I turn on a red light, you know, a red bulb, of course the room's going to turn red, the walls are going to turn red. Now if I turn a blue light in the same room with the red light, we're going to get not a blue room or not a red room, we're going to get something that's combined both colors, and yeah, it's going to be a bit violet, but I mean we're going to get more lights, more luminosity. Then if I add a green light, so I will have the red light, the blue light, and the green light. Supposedly I should get some white color, because those colors add to each other and recreate the spectrum. Of course, between the red, the green, and the blue, we have empty spaces on the spectrum. So the only way really to get the full spectrum would be to have a light of color of each of the spectrum. So let's say I have a red, orange, yellow, green, blue, ultramarine lights, then the rendering of all that would be pretty much white. So instead of you know, it's pretty much the opposite of painting, but that's why it's so interesting to work in your studio. So if you feel your light in your studio is really affecting your colors, think about that. You know, when you go to the hardware store and you get the bulbs, try to get the maximum range on the spectrum, because otherwise some of the colors you paint on your canvas, when you bring them in another environment, they're going to look different. Like if you paint with a tungsten light, if you go in the sun with the painting, you're going to see that the colors on your painting are not the same than inside. Then after that we have the subtractive system, which is a system we use as painters, which is mixing. When you mix two colors, instead of creating, like for example when I say red and blue, you're creating a color that is more vivid, was more light, because the two bulbs add to each other. If you mix pigment, it's different. If you mix red and blue pigment, you're going to get a violet, but the color itself is going to be a bit darker. And now if I start adding all the colors on my palette, I'm going to get something muddy. It's not going to be black, but technically it should be black. It's why in the art store you can buy what we call the trichrome blacks, which are supposedly made mixing three pigments, three colors, the three primary colors, and they supposedly get black. It's not really true. We'll see. We'll talk about it as well. Of course, if you mix yellow, red, and blue, you're not going to get a black. You're going to get something of a dark gray. The black can be made with you know, a lot of different ways. So the ivory black, for example, you burn a bone or ivory, and you scratch it, and you know that black thing that you get with the flame, that's the ivory black. So the subtractive system is what we use. So we have to understand that each time we add a color on a palette to a color pre-existing, we are desaturating that color and we are darkening that color. So as I said, the three primary colors are yellow, red, and blue. Actually, it's yellow, magenta, and cyan. That's pretty much the name we gave them. So on the wheel of color, we have, you know, that's the way we do it. Even in French, we still use for jaune, which is the name of yellow, which still use the letter Y, because you know, it's YMC. So yellow, magenta, cyan. So let's go back to the origin of painting, caveman and so on. It's easy today to imagine going to the art store and buying the colors and, tube of colors and so on. Of course, it's something pretty recent. When the cavemen started painting in the cave and so on, they were using what they had in store, which was pretty much what they found around them. So they paint with blood, they paint with dirt, they paint with that black that I was talking about from the ashes. So they were using those colors, so they were pretty limited in the palette they were using. The other thing was, the color is actually made of pigment. You can collect your own pigment. It's pretty simple. If you have a field in your area that has a really special color, the dirt is really colorful. Like we have some places where the dirt is really reddish or yellowish and whatever. You can just fill up a bucket with that dirt, and then you pour water. You shake the whole thing. You get rid of what falls down right away, which is heavy particle, which is big rocks, and you just keep that muddy water, and then you put it in the sun for days and days and days until the water evaporates completely. And what you have at the end, that dust that is at the bottom of your bucket, that's pigment. That's pretty much what color is made of. The colors, the first colors were mostly minerals because of their durability. Basically, if you use dirt, the color of the dirt is not going to be is not going to change over time because it's already time improved because it's mineral. So working with sienna, sienna, burnt umber, and all those colors are actually made of dirt, made of minerals. So those colors, the durability of those colors is amazing. It doesn't fade. You can put them in the sun for days and days. They're not going to whiten. We all have experienced that. When there's some posters of your favorite rock band and whatsoever, and you hang it up in your bedroom, and the colors are vivid and yellow, orange, and so on. And after a few months, the yellows and the orange disappear, and you just have the blue color remaining on the posters. It's because the sensitivity of those colors to light. Even paintings feel the same. So it's why in some museum you have some works that are hang up in an environment of light that is really low to protect the colors. It's also linked to the material that it's painted on. Some paper don't do well with light. I'm not talking about 2 weeks. I'm talking about on a long term. So the light can affect the colors. So there was a challenge for century about getting new colors. So it was pretty exciting because the blues, some of the greens and so on. How do you make them? How do you get them? So there was a lot of people, chemists and so on, who are trying to get the colors. One of the most famous blues is called lapis lazuli, and it comes from a rock, which is the lazuli, the lapis lazuli. And you grind it, you make a powder, and you paint with it. The thing, that color was really costly because the rock it was made of, what the gem was semi-precious. So we make beautiful jewels out of them. So there was this whole thing, among painters, among artists, about getting the best colors, and they had their little secret how to make them and so on. Same thing. There was some reaction with some metal, like you've seen copper turning green because of the rain, because of the weather, because of everything. So if you scratch that green on top of the copper, which is pretty strange because copper is more orange, then it creates green. So that's another color that can be used in painting. And so during the course of centuries and so on, chemists and painters work closely together to try to get more colors. So just few names of material we can get colors from. So of course, I talked about the dirt. So the sienna dirt, umber, ochre. A lot of them come from Italy. Because of course, it's kind of a place where there was a lot of artists, so a lot of need for colors. But you can find, we have in the south of France, we have a small village, and the dirt around is yellow ochre, and it's beautiful, and you can use that to paint. So it can come from the rocks, the minerals, like the lapis lazuli, so semi-precious gems. It can come from metal. We know cadmium, chrome, zinc, titanium, lead. So all those metal, by oxidation or different chemical process, can change of colors. So the painters were using those chemical reactions to create colors and to use those colors. And then there's also the bones, as I say, about ivory and so on. So that's the pigment. That's the root of the color. Every single color is made of pigment. After, it's what we put to glue those pigments on the support, either it's paper, either it's canvas or walls or whatever. That's the technique. That's the lions that make the link between the pigment and it's going to glue them. I mean, basically, we can paint with dirt, and just with water you can do a beautiful painting. But if it rains, everything will, it's going to be washed out. So what do you put into the pigment in order for it to glue to the surface and not to be alterated in case of damage? So we'll talk about that. But just a little glimpse on that. Like, for example, if you put oil in the pigment, then it's all painting. If you put Arabic gum, which is, you remember the stamps we used to lick and to glue on a piece of paper, that material is called Arabic gum, and it's actually, if you mix it with pigment, that's watercolor. If you mix with an egg, it's tempera. If you mix with kind of milk, whatever, it's kind of it's a process also for acrylic. Of course, the chemical reactions are a bit more complicated than that, but pretty much it's what it is. It's like, for example, you mix it with wax, it's pastel, and so on and so on. So that's the idea of the technique. Now, to go back to the colors, in order to classify those colors, we put them around a wheel, which is called the wheel of colors that we all know. And so we have primary colors. We have yellow, magenta, cyan, so depending on which way we look it at. And then we have secondary color. We have orange, violet, and green. There's a big lie about all that, actually. So in the center of that wheel, we have gray. So the gray is actually supposed to be, no color, which is still a color, but definitely not saturated like the rest of the colors. So there's a big lie we've been teaching, and people have been learning for a long time. People think that you can make, with the three primary colors, you can make all the colors. So that means with yellow, magenta, and cyan, you can make all the colors. If you mix yellow and red, everybody will tell you, oh, you get orange. So that means if I mix orange and green, I'm getting what? I'm not getting yellow, and everybody knows. So it's the same thing then if I mix yellow and red. So basically I'm going to obtain a color that is on the line between those two colors. So the color I'm going to get when I mixed yellow and red is of course something a little bit orange, but it's not going to be on the edge of the circle of the wheel of the color. It's going to be inside, so it's going to be closer to the gray. So same thing when I mix orange and green, I'm going to get a yellow mixed with gray, which is kind of a dirty color. So we've been taught about that three color theory, and it's not true. If you work with three colors, you're going to work in that triangle where those three colors can be mixed together, but you cannot go beyond that triangle. You will never get a real orange, you will never get a real green, and you will never get a real violet. The only way you can get those colors is to have them physically on your palette. So so that's the thing with the wheel of colors. So now imagine, because the thing is a little bit more complex than that, the wheel of color is actually a sphere in 3D. So imagine the planet Earth, okay? So you have the North Pole, the South Pole. So let's say the North Pole is black and the South Pole is white, or the way around, whatever. But let's start with that, okay? The black is on the top, the white is at the bottom, and you have the wheel of color, which is at the equator. Now it's not at the equator for one reason. It's because yellow is lighter than violet. So that wheel of color is actually not horizontal, it's more like this. So we have the yellow closer to the, so I made a mistake, we have to reround the thing. So let's say that North Pole is white and Black Pole is south. You know, it's just a matter of seeing the thing. But anyway, so white pole, North Pole, and South Pole black. So the yellow is closer to the North Pole and the violet is closer to the South Pole. Every color we see can be placed in that sphere. Any color you see is actually corresponding to something in that sphere. So you have white, black, and you have all the saturated colors. What we need to understand is that we can create any color, any one, if you have white, black, and the saturated color on the wheel. You can go anywhere into that environment and find any color you want. So when we get colors like burnt umber or sienna or any kind of color that is not saturated, we can recreate it with saturated colors. What is saturation? So there's three variables. There are three things that define a color. In French, we say teinte, clarté, saturation, which is tint, hue, clarté, which is lightness, brightness of the color, and saturation, which is saturation. So how much pigment, or how much pure, we could say pure, is the color. So once again, depending on that sphere, so the clarity would be either close to the North Pole, the white, or close to the South Pole, black. Then you have the saturation. So is it pretty close to the edge, pretty close to the equator? Of course, the yellow would be really on the wheel of color, so it would be really saturated. And the tint, which is is it yellow, orange, green, blah blah blah. So basically, when I work on my palette, and I will show you my palette, where I mix my colors, I have only saturated colors. So I go from, so I have white and black, and then I have yellow, orange, red, ultramarine, cayenne, green. So with those colors, I can create any color just by mixing them. It's called, you can desaturate a color by mixing another color. Remember I told you about the subtractive system. So each time I add something to one of my color, I'm going to desaturate it. What I mean by that, if I take my orange, beautiful orange, cadmium, chrome, whatever, that is really powerful and saturated, if I mix it with a little of black or blue or green, I'm going to desaturate that color. I'm going to lose that power and bring it closer to the axle of the wheel, the sphere of colors. You can, it's always more interesting physically, to me, like for example, if I want to make a brown, I can take an orange and mix it with black. It's easy, black, blam, it's going to desaturate the color, it's going to make more of a brownish. Now what I like to do is to mix it with blue more than black, because I think there's something more magical about playing with those colors and their antagonism and just, desaturate them this way. I can also control those colors, like for example, if my brown, what I call brown, is too red, I can add a little bit of yellow into it to make it more orange, or I can add a little bit of green and so on. So basically by pulling those strings, you can move the color you're making and getting to something different. You don't have to think just in terms of black, white, and the color. You can add those colors. So I will show you how to do it. One of the most interesting exercise for me when I was in art school, I used to have a teacher who was really like a color freak. He was working for a big truck company, and he was designing the color of the trucks. Like you could design colors of cars or shoes or whatever. And so he was really into a technical approach, a scientific approach of the colors, despite the fact that he was an artist as well. So one day he told us, he said, you take a yellow and a violet, and we're working with a color pencil, because there's something about color pencil that is visual. You can see what you're doing. While if you mix colors, sometimes you just get confused because the colors tend to disappear. While when you use color pencil, you can still see when you're really close the color of your pencil. So he told us you take a yellow and a violet, you take an orange and a blue, and you take a green and a red, and on little square, we're going to just mix them. And perfectly, and we need at the end of the exercise to have 3 patches of grays, because yellow and violet, if you mix them, if they're completely opposite on the wheel of color, and you mix them 50-50, you're going to get in the center, which is the gray color. Same thing for the red and green, same thing for the orange and blue. And the crazy thing is at the end, you're supposed to have the 3 grays exactly the same while you make them with 3 different things. So what I mean by that is there's an infinite way of getting a color on your palette. You know, it's like, you know, the image would be to say, okay, okay, I'm going from my house to the supermarket. Is there's only one way? No, I can go anywhere I want. I can even go to, you know, the other side of the world, flying and come back and be to the supermarket. Of course, the length of my trip will be much longer, but at the end, I will still be from my house to the supermarket. It's the same thing when you mix colors. There's an infinite way to get the color. A color does not exist without other ones around. So, you know, once again, when you create a color, don't follow rules. Understand the process of mixing the colors more than the recipe of making the color. So, you know, there's another thing that we really need to talk about. It's the concept of contrast. You know, like the contrast is something really simple. It's the impact that surrounding has on something. There's tons of different way to explain it. Like for example, if you take someone with 5'8", okay, and you put that person among other people who are 5'2", 5'4", 8", the 5'8" guy is going to look tall. Now, if you put the same guys among an NBA basketball team, he's going to look really short. So it's pretty much the same thing. The contrast is what is around something, and that's going to impact that thing and make it for us to perceive it differently. Same thing, you know, black and white. It's pretty easy to understand that if you take a patch of color, whatever it is, you know, gray, let's say a dark gray. If you put a dark gray in the center of a big pieces of paper that is white, that dark gray is going to look darker than if you put it on paper that is all black, of course, because on the black it's going to look clearer, and on the white it's going to be darker. So it's exactly the same concept and the same effect on colors. If you put a red dot in the middle of a giant green field, that red is going to look much more powerful than if you put the same green, let's see, green, yeah, I think so, then the same green in the middle of another green field, you know, even if the green is slightly different, the green will look more green, you know, surrounded by red. So when you paint, you need to think this way, which is the color I'm seeing is only valid because I'm seeing that color around other color. If I insulate that color, maybe that color is different than when I see it. Okay, let's go back to that green thing. Now, if I take a patch of gray, you know, completely gray, neutral gray, and I put it in the center of a giant green field, that gray is going to look pink. If I put it in the center of a giant red field, it's going to look green. So the color around is projecting the color on what you see. To make it simple, let's say you go in vacation and you get sunburned and you're all red, you know, like a lobster a little bit, and you have a party, so, and you don't want to red. So how should you dress? First of all, if you dress white, you're going to look really dark. You know, even if you look red, you're going to look dark red. If you put green, you know, like a beautiful green t-shirt, you're going to look even more of a lobster because the green is going to project red and you're already red, so you're going to look even more red. So the best things to do if you get really sunburned is to wear orange or red, because that color is going to help calming down the color of your skin. So it's the same thing for a painting. And actually, I think what's the most interesting thing is to see colors. Pierre Bonnard, who is one of my favorite painters, used to say, drawing is reflection and color is sensation. And for a while, I was wondering, questioning what he meant. And what he meant by that is the drawing is something that you can you can learn how to draw. It's like playing music. It's like playing an instrument. There's some rules. There's some, the composition. You have those little thread with little heavy rock or whatever to take the vertical, the horizontal, and so on. You can build a grid. You can. There's a lot of apps on phones now that helps you to draw. You can project. You can use a transparent, transparent table. You can put a photo on the window with a white piece of paper, and you can draw. So drawing is kind of a mechanical process. It's kind of something, at least drawing when you're trying to copy the nature is something you can teach. Colors is more difficult. Color is more about your own feelings and what you see. Like the blue period of Picasso, it's that willingness of painting everything in blue, or the Fauvism movement, which is exaggerating the colors and so on. You can do that with drawing as well, but color is something more intuitive, I think. So I think the main work as a painter, maybe not the main work, but the big work as a painter is to understand color, to understand the power of color and its effect on everything. And I remember a long time ago, I went to paint with a friend of mine, and he thought it would be simple to paint. And so we went outside, we set up the easel. I was doing a lot of plein air painting at the time, and so we started doing a landscape, and it was a snow landscape. We were kind of freezing cold, but it's okay. And so I started painting, with the colors and so on, and then I looked at him, and it was one of his first paintings, and he could not see. He could not see the colors, like he could not see them. He could see them in real, but name them and say, oh, this one is blue, this one is orange, this one blah blah. He could not do that. So there's definitely a process of learning how to read colors. There's definitely something that can help you by training yourself to see colors you usually don't see. It's a beautiful thing, it's like an initiation about something where you just drive around and one day you see some color in a field or the sunset or something, and then you see the colors just in a different way than most of people because you get used to it. It's a little bit like musicians, when you play A or a C minor or whatever, and the guy just by ear can tell you, oh, it's a A and a C minor. It's about training as well. It's about training your eyes to see those colors and to. So yeah, the first step is to see them, which is not easy. It's something that's going to take time to see the colors. Knowing that the other thing that is a little bit disturbing is that we are trained to name things. So, like for example, if I say to you, what color is the grass? Grass is green. No, not often, not always. Sometimes it's green, sometimes it's orange, sometimes it's, once again, it depends of the surrounding colors. I'm not saying it's orange, but it's more orange than green. So that's a little bit of a mental process we need to try to walk away from it, and through some exercise we'll do that as well. Our biggest problem is our brain, who has a tendency to name everything. We name. So by naming, we put something in a box, and sometimes in order to see that thing, we need to see outside the box. We need to understand that colors can be different. Like for example, something really simple, and you can try it. It's pretty difficult actually. The asphalt of the roads in the cities or in the suburb or in the countryside, whatever. What color is that? Everybody. Not everybody, but a lot of people will tell you it's gray. No, it's not gray. Sometimes it's orange. Sometimes it's blue. Sometimes it's. When I say orange, once again, it's not pure orange, but it's more orange than blue, for example. So those kind of color that are sitting in the middle are difficult to perceive. Like, okay, if I paint an orange, the orange is orange because it's even the name is orange. So it's like a tomato. If it's a red tomato, and so on. So for those items, it's pretty simple. Now, when it comes to something that is more subtle, like a tree, like the trunk of a tree, the leaves are usually green or dark green, but sometimes the trunk is so many colors. It can be blue, yellow, orange, and so on. So learning how to see those colors is really important. Now there's another step we need to take, which is, okay, you see the color, you understand the color, you define the color in your brain. Now, are you going to be capable to make it on your palette? Are you going to be capable of creating that color? You know, we have a really difficult time with colors. Like there's some symbol we see every day, and you know, just simple, you know, some logos. You know, I'm not going to take, you know, make down all this kind of simple, but with some of those logos, you can do the exercise for yourself where you have to create the colors of a logo you've seen so many times, and you have to create them from your memory. You will see it's not easy. The memory we have of color is kind of limited. So anyway, learning how to make those colors is a really good exercise, and we'll work on that as well. You know, it's like touching up a painting. Like, for example, you have a canvas that's been scratched, and you have to recreate that color exactly. For some people, it takes 20 seconds. For some people, it can take forever because they don't see it. So I will show you, based on what I explained earlier about, you know, being more orange, more blue, more yellow, more green. What you can do is you mix that color on your palette, you put it on your canvas, and you judge that color regards to the other colors around, and then you say, okay, is it too warm, is it too cold, is it too dark, is it too light, and so on. So basically, by moving that color in your mind, in the wheel of color, in the sphere of color, you can orientate that color that you're making in the direction you want. If it's too dark, of course, you can add some lighter color. It's white or yellow. If you add yellow, you're going to bring the color somewhere else. So you have to compensate maybe the yellow, depending if it's a warm or cold, you know, with a blue or orange, something like this. So anyway, when I talk about color on the canvas or on the painting, I always refer to that color, you know, as with the big words, which are yellow, orange, red, ultramarine, cayenne, and green. And with those six directions plus black and white, of course, you can pretty much move colors around on your palette and to get really close to what you want. So we'll do some exercise like this. Like, for example, a pretty good exercise is, you know, you take a piece of paper. I love to paint oil on paper, you know, because the paper, most of paper, the glue of the paper is made with water. So when you put water on a piece of paper, you know, it kind of dance around, and you know, it's not flat anymore. If you do with turpentine, you will see the paper remain completely flat. It's kind of magical because turpentine does not affect the glue of the paper. So you can paint on paper for exercise. It's great. You know, it's cheap, doesn't cost anything. You don't have to paint on canvases or wood panel, which are more pricey. So anyway, you take a piece of paper, and then, you know, you mix a couple of colors on your palette completely randomly. You mix them and you make like 6 stain of color, little patch of colors like this. And then you clean your brush in your turpentine, you just wipe it off and so on. And then side by side of these 6 little patch of colors, you're gonna have to recreate exactly the same color. That sounds maybe easy, but actually it's not, because you know, you have to make them really, like, you know, right on spot. I do a lot of portraiture, and in portraits, for me, one of the key things is that, you know, we have all seen those because to me the skin tone is definitely one of the most difficult things to paint, because there's some idea we have about colors and skin that is kind of wrong. Okay, let's say you take, you know, we've all experienced that when they colorized all black and white movies. So basically what they do is they take a computer, you know, and they say, okay, this is the face of the guy, and he's going to move there and so on. So we're going to paint it in orange, and the suit's going to be blue, and the pen's going to be orange or whatever. And then there's something not natural about that. There's something weird, because those colored movies are like colored movies. They are not like movie in color. They're like colored movies. And the reason why it doesn't really work is that the skin tone is actually much more than just pink, 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 pink. No. Actually, you know, for men, most of the time on the side of the face, mostly when you're not shaved well like me, you're kind of greenish, because it's reflecting the light coming from here. So it's green, it's orange, it's yellow, it's blue, and of course, depending where you are, when you look at the person, the skin is reflecting another color. Like for example, people with dark skin, like black people, I love to paint black skin because it's violet, it's blue, it's purple. It's pretty much the same thing with skin that are clear, like white people, but it's more subtle. Sometimes I like when colors are really vibrant and so on. So anyway, so when people ask me, what about the skin tone? What is a skin tone? I mean, there's no skin tone. Skin has so many colors. So once again, don't paint a portrait like you would color black and white photo. Paint a portrait like the Fauvism. Um, you know, um, I remember that painting of Matisse, the portrait of his wife, and the critic at the time says she was just getting out of the water. She had drawn and she was dead because of those blues, those green, and so on. But actually, when I start a portrait, it's how I started. Fauvism is almost like the pre-sketch of any kind of painter. Even the classical painter. I'm pretty sure even people like Titian, Velasquez, and all those guys, or Van Dyck, they were starting with really much more colors than the final portrait. It's always easy to calm down things, um, um, you know, you know, pretty much like desaturated the colors. It's more difficult to go back to the color. So when you start a painting, going back to the color theory, just start with bright colors. Just start with saturated colors. You have time to, once the orange is dry, you just can put a glaze of blue and it's just going to go down and become more of a brownish, grayish color. So it's always more interesting to start with really vivid colors, with the most saturated you can and so on. First of all, it's fun. Secondly, it means you saw them, which is at the end one of the most important things, because once you see a color, it means you understand the light, and and so after you just can calm down the whole thing and get to a point where it's almost you can go to photorealism. I don't care. For me there's no good or bad. I mean, there's good or bad paintings, but there's no recipe. So for me, Fauvism portrait, like Derain and people like this, I think they're fantastic, as well as really classical paintings. But I mean, the whole thing is about the color harmony and the painter seeing